Okay, this the presentation is shown now. Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Maha AlAsiri. First, I would like to thank you all for giving me this opportunity. And of course, special thanks to Salman for giving me this opportunity to talk about this topic. So today, this week webinar specifically talks about SOC, everything you need to know and understand about SOC. My topic will be a little bit different, however, it's related. I'm going to talk about GRC cybersecurity function and what are SOC requirements under GRC. So let's start by defining GRC. What is GRC function? So GRC is about three components: governance, risk, and compliance, which is all managing overall organization cybersecurity, governance, and posture, overall the organization, risk management, and compliance. GRC works by aligning your cybersecurity objective with the business and organization objective to achieve its mission. So how do we ensure this? By focusing on the cybersecurity governance, effectively identifying and managing the risks that affect the organization, and ensure to comply with related regulatory compliance requirements. So mainly GRC focus on ensuring the confidentiality of your organization data, ensuring the integrity of your organization data, and the availability of all the data and the information resources required to run your organization. To understand what is GRC, let's talk about each component separately. Let's talk about, first of all, governance. Governance is ensuring alignment of cybersecurity objective with the business objective. Also ensure to integrate cybersecurity controls and requirements with the business process. So you need to, in order to ensure overall cybersecurity governance, you need to ensure that cybersecurity control and requirement is integrated with each business process in your organization, whether it's an HR process, project management process, any transaction process. You need to identify the business process and what are the required controls to integrate with. Third, we need to establish the cybersecurity required policies, procedures, baselines, and standards. Define the required cybersecurity roles and responsibility, not only in the cybersecurity department, also all the related departments such as information technology, HR, project management, even physical security, and of course, the roles and responsibility for each employee in your organization. Also, one of the important factors is developing a cybersecurity awareness program at the organization level. Second, risk. So we need to define a risk management methodology to be followed in your organization. There's a lot of international methodology to be followed, whether it's ISO-based, NIST-based, ISACA-based. You need to identify what methodology is most appropriate for your organization to be followed. Second, you need to conduct risk assessment to identify what are the threats and vulnerabilities your organization faces and what controls you need to apply to reduce the risk level your organization faces. You need to also monitor and track the risks that affect your business. Also, you need to promote risk-based decision-making. So every business decision making, you need to balance it with the risk. So if it's okay to agree to this business decision, also you need to look at the risk factor. Is it okay to follow this business decision and with this risk level? Also, we need to promote risk culture within the organization. Last thing is compliance. We need to ensure compliance with the cybersecurity program, compliance with the related cybersecurity policies, procedures, and baselines. Also, the most important thing is compliance with cybersecurity-related regulatory requirements. So what are SOC requirements under GRC? So international and national regulation discusses cybersecurity domains and their requirements, whether it's access management, log management, physical security, governance function. One of the most important parts the regulation addresses is SOC cybersecurity requirements, what needs to be done and how it needs to be done and when it needs to be done. So below are some standards and regulation that addresses SOC requirements. However, all cybersecurity related regulation addresses SOC requirement. Here I'm going to present some of the regulation. First is SAMA Cybersecurity Framework. As you are aware, SAMA is the central bank that manages all the bank and financial institutions in Saudi Arabia. And they have published a SAMA Cybersecurity Framework to be followed, which is also based on maturity level. NCA regulation, National Cybersecurity Authority, is the main regulator for cybersecurity in Saudi Arabia, and they have published a lot of regulation in terms of cybersecurity. PCI DSS is payment card industry standard, which focus on credit card and debit card data. PCI are deployed or followed by banks or all financial institutions. Also ISO 27001 and SWIFT also requirements. Also, there is a lot of regulations, as I mentioned, for example, like HIPAA or GDPR. So let's talk about SOC requirements under the governance component. So we're talking about the development and compliance to cybersecurity policies and procedures specifically under SOC, which may include log management policy and procedure, event management, incident management, and threat management. We need to check if the roles and responsibilities under SOC team and related departments are properly defined and properly implemented. We need to check the availability of a SIM solution and how it's implemented, and if it's implemented properly in your organization. Check the availability of skilled and trained resources under SOC team. Also to check is there enough capacity and enough resources to ensure like 24/7 monitoring in your organization. Second, we're going to talk about SOC requirements under risk. So SOC is an important function and critical also in your organization. So a risk assessment activity should be conducted periodically on the technology level, which is the SIM, the process level, and the people level under SOC. The risk assessment depends on the methodology defined in your organization. However, below is like high-level steps to be followed. First is you need to identify the system process, the people to be assessed. What are the threats and vulnerabilities that affect the system and process? Analyze the effectiveness of the current controls. Determine the likelihood and impact of the risk that for the SOC. Calculate the risk rating, which is different risk rating levels, which may include critical, high, medium, and low. Also report the risk to your management, to your cybersecurity steering committee. Track and monitor the risk and the treatment of the risks. Compliance assessment. So what is compliance assessment? Compliance assessment is an assessment to identify the compliance status against defined controls and regulatory requirements. You conduct a compliance assessment to identify the gaps about the current state of work and the desired state of work. In order to start a compliance assessment against SOC, you have to first identify the scope of compliance. You're conducting assessment against what standard, what policy and procedure, against what systems and what type of data. So before starting any compliance assessment, you'd identify your scope. After that, we'll start the compliance assessment. So I have documented a high-level steps that provide some insight on the steps to be taken for the compliance assessment. However, this this is different from each organization to the other. It depends on the methodology that is documented in your organization. However, this is the key items to be followed in any compliance assessment. So one of the most important steps to be conducted is interview key personnel and conduct interviews. And this is really important to have it as a first step. Why? Because before conducting any type of assessment, you need to understand what are the technology is being used, how the technology works in your organization, how the process is being conducted under the SOC, how the people under SOC and the employees under SOC are conducting their work. This will give you an overall overview and basic understanding of the SIM and SOC function in your organization. After that, you need to review the related documentation. What do you need to review? You need to review documented and approved related policies and procedures, the defined roles and responsibilities, event and incident management policy and procedure. This will help you to compare what has been documented and approved and the actual work. Does the SOC employees follow these documented policies and procedures or not? Also, it will help you to identify, is there any gaps in the documented policies and procedures? Third step, which is also an important factor, is here where we start conducting the assessment. As I mentioned, it depends on the scope you're conducting the compliance assessment to. However, we're going to discuss critical items that require to be reviewed under SOC. First, scope of monitoring. What is being monitored under SOC? Again, it depends on what is your scope of compliance to. However, you need to understand what is currently being monitored by SIM solution. Check if it covers all assets and infrastructure. As you're aware, the monitoring should be based on the asset classification and risk profile of the asset. As first step, all critical assets should be integrated and monitored by SOC. How do we identify the classification of the asset? Usually, organizations follow two methodologies, which is CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability assessment of impact assessment to the asset. Second, BIA, which is business impact assessment analysis to identify the critical services in your organization. Also to check if all critical assets are integrated with SOC. So when we talk about assets, we're not talking about only application level, everything critical to your organization, which include application, network devices, server level, database level, not only asset level, also we're gonna check some processes should be integrated. For example, remote access, based on a lot of regulatory requirements should be integrated with SOC and should be monitored. Admin and privileged user activity should be also integrated with SOC and properly monitored. Third, we need to review the monitoring and reporting process. So how SOC is, what is the monitoring and reporting process in SOC, and is it effectively implemented from end to end? You need to understand what is being monitored, how do they monitor, when do they monitor. You can compare the reporting and monitoring process to define the SLA. For example, the reporting is based on each incident classification. Incident is classified usually to critical, high, medium, low. Each of it have a defined SLA for reporting. So you need to compare, are this being followed or not? Also, the monitoring frequency and reporting frequency usually should be based on risk assessment results. For example, there's different monitoring, which I believe it will be addressed by Salman later this week. There's daily monitoring based on critical asset. There is bi-weekly monitoring, monthly monitoring, reporting, annual reporting for trend analysis. So this is based on what has been defined and developed as a policy and procedure and regulatory requirements. Fourth, you need to review the post-incident related activities. which includes identify the root cause analysis for each incident, conducting forensic activities. For certain incident, are forensic activities are properly conducted or not. Also, one of the important factors is documenting lessons learned for each incident to help us to prevent it in future. 5th step is we need to review the access of the logs. As logs contain critical data information, we need to understand who has access to the log and what type of access level they have to. So review of the access to the logs periodically is an important factor and needs to be conducted periodically to ensure segregation of duties implemented and need to know, and these privilege principles are implemented. 6, we need to review how the logs are protected. So SIM is a very critical function where it integrates all type of logs from overall the organization. So how do you ensure the protection of the logs? So we need to check what are the cybersecurity controls are being implemented for the protection of the logs. So you need to check where the logs are stored. Are they properly encrypted or not? If it's encrypted, what type of encryption algorithms is being used? Is there a backup process for the logs? All type of protection controls need to be examined during your compliance assessment. Retention of the logs. So what do you mean by retention of logs? So for how long we need to keep the logs stored in SIM? So the retention of logs should not be based on the decision of the retention of the logs should not be based on your opinion or any ad hoc assessment. First of all, it should be based on a regulatory requirements, usually related regulatory requirements that falls under your organization usually defines appropriate retention period. Second, it should be based on a risk assessment result. However, most regulations recommend at least 12-month retention period. And usually the frequency of the retention, the period of the retention increase for critical assets. Threat intelligence. So threat intelligence is one of the most important domains addressed by the regulations. What is the threat intelligence? Threat intelligence is information about threats, threat actors, threat techniques and process they follow. It helps you to prevent harmful event and incident that may affect your organization. Threat intelligence is important to the business for timely identification, timely also detection and handling of incidents and threats. So how it's related to compliance requirement, you need to check is intelligence feeds are properly integrated with SIM, proper IOCs are developed, and how they analyze the intelligence feeds. Is it properly analyzed? Is there subscription to open source or internal sources for the intelligence feeds? So this also should be compared based on the defined threat management policy and procedure. So after reviewing all the related domains and policies and procedures under SOC, finalize the activity, sit with the related SOC team and management, you have to collect the required evidence for your compliance assessment. Then you can submit the compliance assessment report to your related management or related stakeholder. So this is an overall overview of the GRC and how it's related to SOC. As I mentioned earlier, it is different from organization. As it's important, it's related to what has been defined as a policy and procedure in your organization, and what regulation, international or national regulation and standards are fallen under your organization. So I have covered what we look for as a compliance assessment under GRC. However, when you conduct a real compliance assessment, you go more detailed and more technical to ensure to cover overall required areas and functions. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much for listening.